Hello and welcome to this week's Granny's Garden. Now this week we're going to be answering a question. Why is my cypress hedge turning brown? Now really this could be for any one of 4 different reasons. 1 would be lack of water. 2, overzealous pruning. 3, fungus. And 4, aphids. Any one of these elements can be the root of why your cypress hedge is turning brown. And you can have a single problem, it can be a combination, or if you're very, very unlucky, it could actually be all 4 of them together. As you know, if you've been following me over these last few weeks, the property I bought came with certain problems, and I have a cypress hedge on 2 sides of the property. Now, as luck would have it, or bad luck in my case, I have each and every one of those elements attacking the cypress hedge I have. So what I'm going to do is one by one show you what it looks like, how to solve it, and if you're going to plant a new cypress hedge, how to avoid these problems occurring in the first place. We're now on the south side of the property. This is a typical example of what happens when you get a plant with lack of water. This is a cypress hedge that has literally died or is about to die from lack of water. It actually belongs to the next door neighbour, and they have a plot of land that they never actually built a house on, and they have a tiny little section cordoned off for like an allotment, but they don't come very often, and they have no soaker tube, and the hedge hasn't been irrigated. We are in Spain, it gets very hot, so the plant hasn't had access to water. So if I can show you just here, it is literally crumbling under my fingers. Now, something that you are going to hear quite often in this video is one of the problems of a cypress hedge, and to try and recover a cypress hedge, is that once you get down to the brown branches, it will not regrow green growth from brown branches. However, it will grow from the trunk. So, what can you do in this case? When it's this bad, there's very little you can do. But I'm always a person who advocates you've got to give a plant a chance. So what I'm going to do is once a week, over the course of about 8 months, I'm going to put a hose pipe next to each trunk of this cypress hedge, and I'm going to give it a really good soak. That means it could be a good 3 minutes per trunk, and see if anything happens. Now, it is quite easy to dehydrate these cypress hedge. They get extremely stressed if the temperature is prolonged and above 22 degrees. You've got to remember, a little bit of green here, very little bit of green, that these are evergreen hedges. So they're losing water constantly through the leaves. And because they're evergreen, they're losing water all through the year. And if a hedge, or indeed any plant, can't replenish the water it's losing through the leaves, through the roots, then it suffers from dehydration, and you get leaf dieback through dehydration. We're going to do a crash course in water, and over the course of 8 months, soaking it every week, see what happens. See if the actual plant is capable of pushing out new growth from the trunk, because as we said before, you're not going to get new growth from the brown branches. Now, if you're going to plant a new hedge, get it right from the beginning and avoid all these problems. If you're going to have these prolonged summers, and indeed due to climate change, there are many, many countries that now do have these prolonged dry summers and dry winds. And we're not talking about super hot, over 40 degrees. This plant, as I said, can get stressed when it's about 22 degrees. It doesn't take more than that. So if you are planting it, make sure you put some sort of irrigation system behind, like a 1/2-inch poly tube, and at every single trunk you put a little emitter, just to make sure that the root ball is receiving sufficient water. Then you can program it to go once a week, to go twice a week, to go once a day. But have that installed so you can be able to control the water it needs, so it doesn't get stressed. Now, the second element we were talking about is overzealous pruning. Now, here we've got a clear example of that. Before I bought the house, because it was invasive Obviously, they came along with some sort of chainsaw and they hacked it right back. Now, they've actually hacked it so far back that it's actually against the trunk. So half of the hedge is missing. Now, we know that you're going to get no growth from this. So what can I do? Well, the first thing you do is stop any type of pruning whatsoever. And the second thing we're going to do is just have a good look. It looks like it's a goner, and it probably may be. But, however, if we look closely, particularly on this one, you'll see that from the trunk, I am getting new growth. What I'm going to do, apart from, as we said before, this amazing watering we're going to do, the second thing I'm going to do is put a fertiliser, probably about once a month, around it. And it's going to be a fertiliser that's high in nitrogen, because that nitrogen is going to promote leaf growth. And we'll just see where it goes from there. What I'm going to do is just show you how to apply the fertiliser. Now, in actual fact, we have had rain showers most of the night. It just goes to just to prove a point. And as you can see, the actual ground here is wet. However, if you come close, underneath the hedge is absolutely bone dry, which is what I'm talking about, that you need a soaker system or an irrigation system behind. So what I'm going to do is, at the base of each trunk, you can see the trunk here, I'm just going to rake out all these dry needles that have fallen. Loosen it up a bit. And apply this high nitrogen fertiliser. Now you just sprinkle it there, you can see it. Goodness, there's a smell. And just work it in with your hands. Now, because I'm going to be using a nice hose pipe, as I said, once a week for about 3 to 4 minutes each trunk, that's going to soak in. And that should make a difference. It should, because it's high in nitrogen, make this leaf out quite nicely. But I am going to be showing you over the course of the next few months how the hedge responds. Regarding a new cypress hedge and pruning, when you plant your cypress hedge, have in mind that it's really got, for me, in my humble opinion, no business being in a small urban garden. If you look at a cypress tree in its natural state, it's over 100 feet high and 40 feet wide. So you're going to be chopping at something to try and keep it in a state that it wasn't meant to be in naturally. If you do decide to go ahead, do keep certain things in mind. The first thing would be separation when you plant it. So spacing is important. Place them every 5 foot. If you're really pushing it, every 4 feet. But I've actually seen these planted every 60 centimetres. So you just have a tangled mass after very little time. Now, as regards the pruning itself, the first thing you need to do is decide what height you want your hedge. So if you want your hedge, for instance, 7 feet, you really don't do anything for the first few years until it reaches that height. As soon as it reaches the height of 7 feet, cut it back to 6 inches below that height. And then in March of every year, take it down to 6 inches below that required height, and during the growing season it'll grow up. And then the same thing again, 6 inches below, and wherever it grows to. I'm talking about the month of March, because from the 1st of March until the 30th of August, you shouldn't ever do anything to a hedge, neither prune it or spray it. The reason being that these hedges are usually home to nesting birds, and in some countries it's actually illegal to annoy a nesting bird. So just take in mind, do your pruning for the end of February, before the nesting season starts. So we've now talked about the height of a new hedge. During those first years, you just take away, lightly snip, the word is snip, any unruly branches that it might have to keep this conical shape. It's important to keep the natural shape of the hedge, because the natural shape that God gave it was to give you the maximum amount of surface to be exposed to sunlight. It's very difficult, if this is my hedge, if the sun is shining here, it just penetrates the top part of the hedge. Whereas if it's in a conical or an A shape, the light comes down over a lot more surface, which means the light can penetrate almost to the trunk in a large surface area. And we know that the trunk is capable of sprouting new growth, new green growth, even when the hedge is in a very, very bad condition. So it makes it easy to recover if something goes wrong. Now we're going to talk about fungus. The main type of fungus that attacks the cypress is called Ceridium. So you might be giving your hedge enough water, you might be giving it enough food, and you're still getting dying branches. Now if you're finding that, you definitely need to be looking for fungus. The way Ceridium works is that it starts constricting the vessels that are responsible for taking the nutrients and the water up into the canopy. So the blood vessels or sap vessels are either semi-constricted or even completely stricted, and the actual tree, despite having everything around its roots, is not getting sufficient water or nutrients and is actually dying of starvation and thirst, and all the branches will start dying out. So you need to treat it with a systemic fungicide. Now the fourth element, the last element, is aphids. Now, according to a research done by the RHS, which is the Royal Horticultural Society, and Malling Research, over 50% of all browning of cypresses investigated were caused by aphids. Now that's a massive amount, so it's worthwhile taking into consideration. Now usually aphid attack starts at the base and it'll start working its way up if it's not treated, as of course this hasn't been treated. If you don't want to sort of like get a microphone, a magnifying glass out and be looking, run your hand in, and if it comes out a bit sticky, you can guarantee there's aphids there, because aphids secrete this like sickly sweet like honeydew, and honeydew attracts ants. So if you get down and look closely at the trunk of a tree and it looks like the M25 or Route 66 with ants going up and down like crazy, they're probably after that sweet honeydew, so you can guarantee you've got aphids attacking there. Like before with the fungicide, you need an insecticide. And I think with something as serious as this, you need a serious insecticide. I hate using insecticides, but sometimes you've got to do it. We've now seen each of the 4 elements that can cause browning in your cypress hedge: water, pruning, fungus, and aphids. What I've tried to do in this video is show how each of these elements, either individually or in combination, can cause these problems, and how, if possible, to put them right. Obviously, prevention is better than cure. My advice would be to nurture that gardening eye you have. All of us have it. It's innate in gardeners. If you spot a little brown patch that may seem insignificant on your cypress hedge, it's not going to go away, no matter how much you want it to. So you've got to nip it in the bud. You now know the 4 reasons. As a gardener, this could be a really, really interesting experiment. I've never seen in an urban garden a hedge that's so badly attacked by all 4 elements at the same time. So for me, I'm actually going to enjoy applying a knowledge base to each and every part of this hedge and seeing if it's possible to bring back from death's door, even if it's a small portion of the hedge. Because the logical thing to do would be to get it and rip it out and start all over again. But as a gardener, I just like to experiment and like to find out what's possible and what's not, and to see if any of the solutions or the insecticides or the fungicides are really effective when something is this far gone. So do please join me on this journey. I am definitely going to be giving updates because this is going to be of interest to a lot of people. But please, please, please do not let your hedge get to this state. Act as soon as you see something small. Anyway, thank you for having joined me on today's session. I know it's a bit long-winded, this session, but I think there's a lot to be said about browning, and it certainly brings a lot of heartache, especially to someone who's got an established hedge. Thank you for having joined me. If you have liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to join me every week, please do hit the bell and subscribe to the channel, because it does help to make it grow. And join me again next week. So it's bye from me.